More taxes, more penalties. That's exactly what this report shows for 2023. What's all those IRS agents doing? They're actually taxing and penalizing the middle class. We'll talk about that today. Also, more seniors are having to go back to work. They're having to come out of retirement because the inflation caused and the fact that they cannot live on what their retirements and Social Security is providing. One more report states that the Trump rebate rule for Medicaid should come back because Biden is running it into the ground. Premiums are up for Medicare. Not only that, as he is taking away from your benefits, he's giving billions to China. Let's dive in today. Hey guys, welcome to the Max. Thank you so very much for being here today. If you are new to the channel, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell. Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you don't like the content. That's okay, but let us know what you think about today's video. Today we're going to be talking about kind of how this financial problems and things like this economy and Bidenomics is affecting seniors and retirees and people who are getting ready to do that. That's why we always tell you as a younger age, start preparing now, start budgeting, start getting on a budget, get away from debt and making sure that you can thrive as you get older, because what's happening now is exactly what we would see in a situation where we relied on government to assist us and it's falling through. Let's talk about these three stories. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is the fact that the Trump rebate rule for Medicare. Medicare premiums have went up over 20%, and it's went up for 50 million Americans. In 2020, President Trump announced that there was a policy that was going to help give rebates for drug manufacturers. It was called PBM and allowed for billions to be in the pockets of Americans. Well, Biden cut that, and so therefore it cut some of those benefits that were going towards Medicare Part D. Now I want you to listen to this. In 2025, it's estimated if these don't get put back in, if these Trump rebate rules do not get put back in, that the premiums could go up 50%. 50%. And this is all because Biden chose to get rid of this rebate rule that Trump put in. It saves millions and billions for American seniors. At the same time, when seniors were not getting their money back, the Biden administration needed to rob Medicare to subsidize Chinese electrical vehicles with a $300 billion tax credit. So he's taking away from you, taking away from your rebates, and also taking money out of places that should have been set aside for our seniors to give to China. Now let's think about that. How dangerous is that precedent? Now, there's been a lot of pushback because a lot of people are saying, hey, we can help Americans by just putting this back in. And you could do it silently. A lot of times Biden dogs out Trump's policies and then he kind of slides some of those back in because he knows they're good policies. Well, in this case, if he slides it back in, it would save Americans money, and of course he would take credit for it. But this is exactly what needs to happen, because what is now happening is they're taking away from your rebates. It's costing you more with premiums, especially if you're older, you know this. And then thirdly, they're actually draining some of the Medicare monies to go towards China for electrical vehicles. And what's so funny is the subsidizing is not to American companies, it's to Chinese companies. What are they doing? This is going to hurt seniors more and more. This is why we have to make a change in leadership, because the Bidenomics is affecting the seniors. And that goes right into the second story of how most retirees are having to get back to work. A true retirement nightmare, and this was from an article from Michael Snyder. It says the Social Security program was instituted to help elderly Americans thrive during the retirement years. Unfortunately, millions upon millions of retired Americans are finding themselves where monthly Social Security payments are not nearly enough to cover this out-of-control spending by our government, which has caused for inflation and the cost of goods going up. One recent survey found that a whopping 85% of U.S. adults now consider inflation to be the most important political issue of this election. And that what that's showing is people are struggling and starving for money. They need money to make it. Well, the more we frivolously spend, not just Democrats, Republicans too, but Democrats are the head of it right now, the more we frivolously spend, the more our inflation goes up, which is costing more money. Just like the Medicare spending just a second ago, the premiums are high. I called my energy company yesterday because my bill for utilities has went up like 30-something%. Our insurance has went up 22%. So when we talk about that in groceries, I'm still working. So for instance, if I think we need to make more money, I may need to do side hustles. I may need to figure out some other things or cut my budget more. But for individuals who cannot work or people that are already retired, they've probably cut as much as they can, and all of a sudden those expenses are still climbing because of the way that we're doing our economy right now. So this study shows that most people are realizing they've got to go back and get a job at 70 and 80 years old to even make ends meet to afford their grocery bills. Of retirees, 44% of Americans that are considered quote-unquote retired are thinking about going back to work because they realize the money they are having is not allowing them to survive this economy. A growing number of retired Americans are considered returning to work to help with this chronic inflation. About 44% of these respondents show that their Social Security benefits are not adequate. Needless to say, trying to go back to work in the 70s, 80s, and 90s is not easy to do. So they're trying to find work, and then all of a sudden they're not there because they can't do what they once did. Today, the average Social Security payment is less than half the average retired American's needs for a month. It says the average Social Security payment, for instance, is $1,907 for 2024. According to this Social Security Administration, that is just a fraction of what Americans averagely spend of $4,818 by age 65. Now, can you live under $4,800? Absolutely. But what it's showing is what you're actually bringing in for Social Security, for the most part, is only about 50% of what you actually need to make it. So say you're only bringing in $1,000, you really need that another $1,000 just to cover bills. If you're bringing in $2,000, you may need closer to $3,000 or $4,000 to cover bills. Well, Social Security benefits are not going up; they're actually starving it, like we talked about with borrowing against it. So, what is the hope when all these people are looking for jobs at 70s, 80s, and 90s? What is their goals? If you can believe it, compared to 3 years ago, the typical household in this country is spending an extra $1,069 a month just to maintain the same standards of living. So comparable to 2021 till 2024, you have to spend an extra $1,000 just to have what you had in 2021. That's why we always tell you, please invest in food, invest in animals, invest in homes, real estate, gold. That's not just money in the bank, because your money in the bank is failing you when your congressmen and your politicians and your president are spending like crazy. It says a typical U.S. household needed to pay $227 more a month in March to purchase the same goods just from a year ago. It shows that most people need $700 to $1,000 more a month just to eat and just to cover their utilities and necessities. These are not wants, these are needs. This is going to grow and be a bigger snowball of a problem as we continue. And the bad thing is, it's not going to just stop with this election. No matter who wins, even if Trump wins, the snowball is already going down the hill, and they've got to learn to stop it. You can put roadblocks in, you can come back and put the rebates in, you can come back and try to start making good policy, but it will take time for it to correct itself. All the while, these 70, 80s, and 90-year-olds are not making enough money. So what's going to happen is they're going to have to move back in with children, or they're going to have to figure out how to make a job, how to get a job at their age. Or they will have to go back into a government situation where government takes over more control of their life. What is the good answer when Americans are having to go back to work? Hopefully your health will stay up where you can do something. I would learn to find ways to side hustle in a way that you could do that from home if you can. Think of affiliate marketing, think of other ways that you can do that, writing recipes, Substacks. Figure out something you can do. We're getting to this tight point, and I don't think it's going to get any better in the foreseeable future because it's going to take a long time to right the ship. It says that today, 20% of the entire population of California is considered to live in poverty. The more that we see this Bidenomics move, the more we're going to see the effects of what it's actually doing to the American people. It shows how much of a dire problem we're in. Listen to this. This is a new story from Martin Armstrong from Armstrong Economics. It says, the government has become desperate for funding. IRS will hammer U.S. taxpayers for more penalties. They had record penalties taken in 2023. $7 billion were in tax penalties and tax problems that these IRS agents are able to take in 2023. That's a 300% overage compared to 2022. Now, typically I say, well, no one needs to be delinquent in taxes. But I go back to the fact of saying we should have had a flat tax in the first place, and there should be one tax only, and that's it. No other sales tax, no other income tax, one tax, flat tax. If our government can't make it on that, they need to cut the government bottom lines. But what we're actually doing is it's taking and taxing from is taking this money as penalties from its own population. is not collecting just the tax, it's getting all the penalties. So a $7 billion tax, extra tax to Americans. Guess what? Most of this come from the middle class. It went after middle class and small businesses. It didn't go after the impoverished or the higher end like it said. It went after the middle class. So what it's doing is taking $7 billion more out of circulation and putting right back in the government's dole for penalties only, not counting the actual tax itself, which is over. It says these funds were mere chump change, but this will allow them to bring in more money as they're putting so much money out when it comes to all these frivolous wars. The average penalty for underestimating taxes was $150 in 2022. This year, the average penalty is $500. So they're going to charge you more for any mistakes you're making. What happens is that makes you have to go and pay for someone to do your taxes to make sure they're done right, or make sure you know that you're going to be penalized if you do something wrong. This is a bad policy because what it's doing is affecting most of middle class only. Yet the Biden administration wants you to believe that they care deeply about the working man. Biden wanted to hire more IRS agents this year to raise the penalties to make sure the public confidence dissolves when a state begins to hunt for their own citizens' taxes. They want to be able to collect with no issue, this report says. The government becomes the clear enemy. We haven't seen this kind of penalization on the American people, which is extra taxation on top of your taxing that you're already getting, the Biden administration put in. All right, guys, so we just shared you 3 major stories. All of these are affecting because of the policies of the Democrats and the Biden administration. The fact that your Medicare is up, the fact that you're going back to work because all of a sudden this economy is failing and flailing. I don't blame it just on Democrats. It is definitely a Republican problem too. Just for instance, the 3 bills that came to the floor just yesterday, 2 of them were led by Democrats, not by Republicans. So our Speaker of the House that's supposed to stand up for conservative fiscal policy, 3 bills came to the House for spending. 2 of them were from the Democratic Party, not from the Republicans. So the minority was bringing the vote, not the majority. That's a bad policy. What we're doing is we are reaping the harvest of what we sowed with a trash economy and spending like crazy. It will affect middle class. It will affect the older amongst us, and it will make sure that you are always having to let the government take care of you because they're not only taxing you, now they're penalizing you more. Now they're costing you more with extra tax, with inflation and interest, and then all of a sudden, everything that you've worked so hard for, your Social Security and Medicare, they're using it to pay other governments, and you're getting a half value of what you probably should be getting. That's a lot of issues that we have to face. Please make sure you're paying attention to this because they're going to spin it to show, well, the Republicans are against the common man or the middle class or the retirees. All the while, these 3 policies show the exact opposite. Remember, research, find wisdom, see the common sense approach to what's actually happening because this is actually what's happening. The Biden administration is costing you and your family more of your hard-earned money. And therefore, when your grandparents or great-grandparents or yourself have to go back to work at 70 and 89 years old, you have only one administration to thank because it's costing you $1,000 more than it did just 3 years ago to have the same standard of living. Thank you, Mr. Biden. Guys, let me know your thoughts. God bless.